when I was thinking about Rabbi Pesach of how to introduce you, I was a bit confused because I thought I'd read somewhere you were a rabbi. In fact, I had a suspicion you'd worked with us in St Kilda Shule as an activities director. You've worked in other shuls. I can see the president of another shul. I won't obviously mention Joanne Levy by name because that would embarrass her, and I won't mention the Sephardi synagogue. But I know you were associated there as well, and have many strings to your bow. So welcome, and we're going to speak to you today about some of the fascinating work you're doing by flying overseas. Now, I understand that you now act in, for part-time at least, as a courier of frozen embryos. How long have you been doing that?
Been going now for about 5 years. Thanks for the lovely introduction, by the way, and it was a wonderful stint of working at St Kilda Shule again. I would always enjoy the opportunity to work with you, Ronnie. You're a terrific boss.
Oh, thank you. I'll tell my wife as well.
It was about 5 years ago that I started this long journey where a friend of mine in Sydney got in touch with me about this potential work in the IVF industry, and it sort of grew out of there. But now it's pardon the pun, it's really taken off.
And it's for the Jewish community?
It's not for the Jewish community necessarily, although strangely enough, just yesterday, I have been in touch with a rabbi in Sydney, and now someone from Israel just got in touch with me who works with a group in New York, because all over the world, embryo couriers all over the world right now are shutting down with the quarantine. And so I'm fielding questions from left, right, and centre. So now I suppose there is the Jewish aspect too.
Right. So I assume you're engaged by a fertility clinic, or is this private people? How does that work?
It's now I think multi-layered in terms of how people are contacting me. Whether it's through the doctors who I now have a network with in IVF Australia, now in Monash IVF, and then also on some Facebook groups. There's some organic growth from people talking about it on Facebook, people who need transportation of their embryos around the world, also their sperm and eggs, and what else is there? There's also some of the big transport companies who do these kinds of things, or used to do these kinds of things, are also getting in touch with me as well.
Right. So you said it's multi-layered. So I'm not quite sure then who is the client, who pays for this service? Is it a clinic or at private individuals? How does that work?
The most commonly the clients are directly paying, although over the last 6 months, there's been more payment coming from clinics, because the clinics are corralling all the people who need the transportation done, and it's just impossible for people to find. Not impossible, but the individuals themselves out there, the clients out there, are finding it difficult to find anyone to do the work, and so the doctors and the clinics are in the know about who's actually operational at the moment.
I get it. Now,
should we have a clearer idea about what I actually do?
Yeah, well, actually, let's get.
Has that been understood a bit? Absolutely explained?
Yeah, sure, go for it.
All right, so
a bit more.
Okay, so there are people all over the world who, mind you, I don't necessarily get exact details about what's going on. I'm a courier, although I do end up speaking to the clients and the doctors and the lab technicians at various points in the process. But the whole idea is that people need embryos or their sperm or their eggs moved from country to country, and there was a gap in the transportation business in regards of Australia. It happens quite a lot over in Europe and in America.
Yep, I think the internet's frozen.
So, so for example, there might be someone, a really simple example might be someone who was living, say, in America, and they've moved over to Australia sometime in the last year, and they were doing IVF, which is in vitro fertilization, where people are infertile except for getting help from a laboratory or from a doctor. And they have their embryos stored, cryogenically stored in a laboratory somewhere overseas, and they move countries and they want to bring their oocytes with them, the
Yep.
embryos, and they bring them into the country, and that's what my job is. So they get in touch with me and I bring them over. Or there's other reasons too. There's special testing that also happens overseas. And so the testing can't be done in Australia, so I take it across overseas for them.
Oh, so your clients actually could call you from anywhere in the globe. They're not calling from Australia.
It's all over. I've had a request from people from Mauritius, this is just in the last few months, Mauritius, Japan, Korea. There was a strange one from Korea, actually. I've been communicating with her in the last few days because she's had her embryos frozen for the last 5 years, and she needed to get them out of storage in Korea because they have a 5-year limit, and she's now living in Australia, and she thought she could go back to Korea to get the rest of the IVF process done, except with the 5-year limit, the hospital is telling her that she needs to get rid of that they're going to dispose of her embryos, and she's ringing me in a panic, and which is ridiculous, of course, because with all of the world travel business shut down and quarantine and all this sort of thing everywhere, this is the worst time that it could possibly happen to her, that she's going to have her embryos disposed of. So she's trying to get them out of the country. Where else? I had a query the other day from Cyprus to Spain, one from Israel to Australia, some to Ukraine, some to Georgia, Toronto. It's happening all over the world.
Okay, so I've got a whole lot of questions, how people find you. So let me just start off with this. If I wanted to be in a courier here in Melbourne, I suspect there's no training. I just get a van or whatever or stick a sign on my car and I get clients. But is there specialist training for this sort of thing? This doesn't sound like your average sort of courier business.
Probably in terms of training, the most important part is the equipment training. So the equipment that I carry with me is a specialist cryogenic flask, which I suppose in the simplest sort of sense, it's like a glorified thermos, except that it's much more than that. And so the training with that kind of, in fact, even just yesterday, I was speaking to another person who's acting as a courier, but not operational at the moment. And even yesterday, I'm learning new things from her about the way she's used the equipment. And so learning a lot about that is one of the most basic necessities of this business. And then I've become a certified member of a number of worldwide organizations, which also helps in terms of the qualification and also for the credibility for governments around the world. So, for example, I'm a certified member of Medevac Foundation International and the International Association of Flight and Critical Care Paramedics and the Association of Air Medical Services, etc., etc.
Well, actually, I was going to ask you. So now that's helped me clarify. So when people are going searching for you, are they going through these registered organizations, or how are they finding you?
The International Association of Flight and Critical Care Paramedics has me on their register because there's a drastic reduction in these services going on in the world at the moment. And so when people need a cryogenic service, then they get in touch with these larger organizations and they have me on their register. I'm not sure if I've actually had a contact from them yet, but yes, I have. I'm on their records, and so that's how they can get in touch with me. Also, some of the big companies like UPS and FedEx and a couple of others called World Couriers, etc. They also do not deal in these kinds of deliveries, in this kind of transport, so they know that they can actually pass the inquiry over to me.
So if I do a Google search for frozen embryo courier, is that how you come up, or do I have to go via one of these internationally registered organizations, or both?
Up until a year ago, I actually had a Google advertisement for it, but over the last 6 to 12 months, I've decided to remove that advertisement because
Right. By the way, your
sorry,
internet was cutting out just a little
did
bit.
that cut out then? Sorry about that. I said that
So over the last 6 months, something changed.
yeah, over the last 6 to
Yeah.
12 months, the inquiries became rather inundating for me. So I cut out any advertising, and it's really just through word of mouth or history that I've had with clinics, and that's how people are getting in touch with me now.
Right now, you've said you're registered as part of a whole range of organisations. Does that give you some sort of priority or something at the airport, or how's that work?
Often I'll go, I'm now registered with the Australian government as of a few days ago, actually. But it's only a matter of certification from them that I'm now flight crew. So, so I can bypass the regular immigration queues and go through the flight crew queue. I won't say that 10 times. And people generally have heard about embryo courier, the embryo courier business. It's not, it's rare, but it happens. They do receive these things in the airports and on the airlines. So they do know to either expect me, or they know what I'm involved in, and and I wouldn't say it's necessarily an easy process, especially for things like X-ray security, that I definitely take a lot longer in that part of the process.
Right. So when you buy your ticket, do you have to let the airline know in advance that you're carrying special cargo?
I have to let them know that I'm carrying the equipment, and that there's the embryos that are carrying with me, and I have a certificate from the clinic, and then I have to pass that on to. There's a special Australian Border Force email. I send that information to them, and then when I arrive at the X-ray security, they already know that I'm there, that I'm due to arrive, and they've got me on their list, and hopefully the process through screening will be a lot easier. That's ideally.
Okay. And in practice, it doesn't always work.
And no, it doesn't always work. I think one of the most challenging times was in the Ukraine, when I was on a small airline only a month ago from Kiev to Odessa, and the representative from the airline would not even let me into the airport without an X-ray, and the actual security were absolutely fine. It's the representative from the airline that was giving me trouble, and the security in the airport was screaming at him, "Embryoshka, embryoshka."
Yeah, well, I know what Yoshka means. Okay.
I thought that was humorous, but I didn't show it.
Okay. Now, are you actually carrying this sort of thermos that you describe in your hand? It doesn't go in any luggage. You're actually carrying something in your hand. Is that right?
Right. Ideally, it should be hand carried. It should be. It comes with you on the aeroplane, and most of the time, the cabin staff, they allow you to put it into a special cabin so that you can. So there is a place. They don't tell most people about that. There are places inside the aircraft where they can store luggage, and hopefully normally they put them in those places.
You can tell us there are only about 100 people at the moment. No, it's okay. And this is being recorded and it will be viewed again on YouTube, but you can just tell all of us. Okay.
That's right. If you're sitting next to me on the aeroplane, you'll also see all of this going on too.
Hang on, if I'm sitting on the seat next to you, I don't see anything because you said it's been put away, right? It's been put in a compartment.
Normally, although normally it's in a cabin that's nearby me, one of the staff cabinets.
Yeah.
But often it takes a lot longer to sort out than 10 seconds. Like you might put your thing in an overhead cabinet. So normally the staff are running backwards and forwards to me and asking all sorts of questions about it. The KLM staff actually on one of the last flights between Amsterdam and Atlanta about 3 weeks ago, we had quite a lengthy discussion. They wanted to know all about it, even though they'd stored it and everything was fine and everything. They had lots and lots of questions about it.
Right. Now, you're flying around the globe, and we'll talk shortly about some of the countries you've been to. But how much lead time do you have? If you get a call tomorrow, when is that? When are you expected to do your courier component? Is it weeks away, months away?
So there is I'll give you a perfect example. At the moment, we have a delivery leaving hopefully in the next few days from Sydney to Los Angeles.
Yeah.
I'm in the middle of booking the flight at the moment. The final consent form came through from a client only about an hour ago, and then I have to organise payment from them. And there is a possibility I'm waiting for a liquid nitrogen courier to drop off some liquid nitrogen to me, so I can deal with the equipment. And I may very well go this afternoon to pick up the embryo for someone just this afternoon in, I think it's in an IVF centre in Collins Street. And once I've got it, I've got to do something with it. It's obviously time sensitive. So it may be that I actually leave even tonight for Sydney or tomorrow morning for Sydney, drop it off to my courier to a staff member of mine in Sydney, who will then go and pick up from another clinic in Sydney. And then the idea is to get her on the flight to Los Angeles as soon as possible. And I'm hoping that might either be Monday or Wednesday next week.
So you're talking about hours or days. That's a typical thing. It's all done in a rush.
Yes, luckily I'm gainfully unemployed, not doing anything else. Which is not true. I've got a very busy life, but when these things are pressing, when these things are happening, you have to act on them. So yes, it is very time sensitive, and you have to jump on flights that might ordinarily cost $150, and they'll cost you $300 or $400.
Right. Now, every time you speak, I've got lots of questions. Okay, let's talk about family. How does your family, I mean, if I said to my wife, I've got to go away, I'll tell her in a few months' time, but you're telling your family I might be going away tonight or something. Are they putting up with this, are they?
They're often happy to see the back of me, but Baruch Hashem, I've got the audio turned down so my wife can't hear me, hear what the question was. Rochelle and my girls are wonderfully independent, and we've got a few very, very mature grown-up young ladies here. So the household pretty much runs itself, thank God, and they're doing a great job of it. But certainly in the last trip, which I believe as of 12 hours ago, I may have exemption for. On the last trip, I was put into quarantine for 2 weeks. So
that was in Australia, wasn't it?
That was in Sydney, and at the Novotel Darling Harbour, which full credit to them, it's a good hotel. I'm glad I got a decent room overlooking Sydney City, which gave me at least something to look at instead of the four walls. But that is a very trying time. That's very difficult.
Now, you don't hide it very well, but I believe you're an Orthodox Jew. So first question is going to be, how are you managing with the Chagim? Someone rings you this morning and says, I'll deposit money into your account in the next hour. Well, hang on, you've got, whether we've got Shule or not is another matter, but you've got Yom Kippur coming up and then Sukkot and so on. How are you managing this?
I'll tell you, one of my most favorite things is for example, in Melbourne Airport, Newark Airport, in New Jersey, pulling out my tefillin when I'm sitting there at 7 a.m. or 6 a.m. and davening with hundreds of people around me. I try and find a little corner to go into, but often that's not the case. And it's just wonderful actually to put on your tefillin and daven in those places. And people are very respectful. In terms of the chagim at the moment, you just have to organize your time around it and make sure that your sukkah is ready to go at a moment's notice.
So in theory, you could be away for Sukkot.
I won't be away for Sukkot. Rochelle, I won't be away for Sukkot, darling. She said, Baruch Hashem.
Okay, now you mentioned about tefillin. Hang on. So when my wife and I go away, we normally plan well in advance. We know exactly where we're going to stay. It's Shabbos friendly, and we know where to get the kosher food. You must be going to places at relatively short notice without much opportunity to prepare. How do you manage?
Right. So I certainly have relied on my wonderful wife Rochelle, who often calls ahead for me. And so, for example, in Kiev and in Odessa, she got the names of the rabbis there and where the Jewish community center is and where the kosher restaurants are. And that was excellent information to have. And often I've got the contacts of the rabbis or someone in those centers at every place I go. In Toronto, it's really, really good actually being Jewish and doing this job, because often you've got a great network everywhere you go, or you know someone who knows someone, and that is incredibly helpful. I was speaking to this lady yesterday who does a job similar to mine, and she was almost stranded in Peru about 9 months ago, and she had no one. She left on the day that Peru airports went into lockdown, and she would have had no one there. So it's an excellent, to be Jewish and do this job is actually very, very handy. And also the Jewish kosher businesses, you know generally the suburbs, the areas where people who are your contacts are going to be. In Toronto, I know the area now where the Jewish people are and where my cousins are, so, and where my friends of friends are, so it's very good, very handy.
So you mentioned Ukraine, you've mentioned Los Angeles, you mentioned the US, Canada. What other countries?
Or I've been to Singapore. I can't remember at the moment.
You would not have flown on into any Arab countries or on any Arab airlines, would you? Or?
Only actually by transit. So there hasn't been. I remember once I was asked to go to Lebanon, which I ummed and ahed about perhaps a bit too long, and thankfully, hopefully went to someone else. It's a good question whether I would do a job like that, but I flew on Turkish Airlines, which I have to give full credit to. They were excellent. I landed in Istanbul, magnificent airport. Oh my gosh, what a magnificent airport! And it was so wonderful to see on the departures screen up in the departures, huge departures hall there, to actually see Tel Aviv, and Nachat was written in Hebrew in Istanbul airport. Was just marvelous to see. So that was exciting. And you know what, on those flights and in those places, they all know you're Jewish. They know. I leave my tzitzit hanging out. And sometimes I don't have my hat on. They know straight away, and they're very respectful. They're very friendly.
And kosher food and everything.
Kosher food and everything.
Okay. Do you go from clinic to clinic, or you go from clinic to an airport and someone picks it up from there, or how does that work?
At the moment, I've purely been operating clinic to clinic, which may not necessarily be the most efficient way to handle it. But if it's one or two deliveries, then clinic to clinic is fine. However, now that I'm taking as many as a dozen different deliveries at once, I'm starting to get in touch with people in those locations, and hopefully they can pick up from me and take it to where it needs to go. And they're all trusted and reliable people who have been in the industry for many years.
Right. Okay. I didn't realize you actually may be a courier for multiple clients at the same time.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So I just got a I won't show you any details, but this is the manifest that I got just a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
And these are pickups from Perth and Newcastle, Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, going to Ukraine and Georgia and some other countries listed here as well. Yeah, surrogacy actually, by the way, is one of the other reasons I believe I do what I do. And it's an amazing thing to know that people are going to have children because of the transportation work.
That is beautiful.
I just want to tell you one lovely little thing is on one of my first trips, which was a few years ago, whenever it was, I was flying, I think it was on a United Airlines, and there was as only an older, larger black woman from one of the southern states. I'm not saying anything bad, but you just have to have this image in your mind of how she's talking to me. She's so friendly and so personable. And I told her what I was doing. She'd never heard of it before. This one of the cabin staff, she was on United. And she says to me, "You're carrying a couple of little souls around. That's amazing." And I thought that was fabulous. Just to hear that, I'd never heard it in that context before. It was so clever.
That is incredible. I know we're about almost out of time. I have to ask you, how has COVID changed things for you in terms of getting flights, in terms of quarantining overseas? How does that work?
The exemption processes, the bureaucracy, the hoops I have to jump through now have risen exponentially. It was simply a matter before of getting on an aeroplane and going. Now you need to check all the websites of countries you're going to, get particular exemptions from countries. Ukraine actually have a very clever system. They have an insurance that you have to buy when you enter the country, even though I can't go there anymore because only citizens are allowed in there now. But all countries have their different rules. We're ringing up all the embassies before we go to make sure we can go, and for how long they think these rules will stay in place. Because even I was talking to some airline staff a month ago, and they said to me that the rules are changing day by day. In Ukraine, actually, they were almost not going to let me back on the aeroplane back to Australia, or back to America, even though I was meant to be going on Emirates, and Emirates bumped me off their flight because of their travel quotas, and I had to go back to America. And then there was a question of whether I was allowed to go back to America from Kiev or from anywhere inside Europe. And they said I could go from Istanbul. You can imagine the mental anguish and the exercises that you have to go through. It's that's the most daunting at the moment.
Amazing. I've got so many more questions, but I'm probably going to have to cut it short at this point in time. And I'm sure other people have got questions. Again, this is probably one of those interviews, ladies and gentlemen, where we should do 16 more follow-ups.
I just want to, can I just address some of those quick questions there?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Organs, I don't transplant organs. We don't do transplant organs, although someone asked me about a year ago if I could take a couple of heads from Melbourne Airport to the Howard Florey Institute. We thought that was very funny. There is a lock on the cryogenic carrier. Accumulating lots of points, not necessarily because we're flying on lots of different aeroplanes. The charge for the client, believe me, we're charging the clients a lot less than what some of the other companies are charging. So the whole goal that I started with was that we would do things reasonably. Yes, my wife is very patient. If the flights are delayed, the flights are delayed. There is a recording of this talk, which I'm sure you'll come to.
Yes.
Thanks, Sandra, for saying that there's nothing more precious. That's true. And it's nice to speak to you all.
Mm. Gee, a lot to absorb, and I think, as you know, I've had about a dozen more questions lined up, but we've gone as far as we can in the time we've got. So on behalf of everyone, I say thank you very much. People can actually click, there's a thing there, reaction. Oh, they're doing that, that's fine. That's great. Thanks you very much. Interesting and informative as usual. Certainly given me a lot to think about. Maybe we should do if not a follow-up, maybe I should just do an article with you in our Shabbat Shalom newsletter and fill in people. People do ask every week. In fact, I had an SMS this morning from someone who wants to participate but can't at 11 o'clock. Is it recorded? The answer is it is. So if you weren't smiling, by the way, you were on video. But it is recorded and it's uploaded. I try to upload it today to our YouTube channel. The St. Kilda Shule has a very active YouTube channel. It has about 6 or 7 videos every week. This is obviously one of them. It's youtube.com and it's / St. Kilda Shule and the number's 12 because we're 12 Charnwood Grove. Coming up, besides the fact we've got Yom Kippur coming up, and I'll take the opportunity to wish all of our listeners and participants a Shana Tova and a Gemar Chatima Tova. Those of you who are in Victoria, and that accounts for most of you, we've got from the US at the moment, possibly from interstate, but those of you in Victoria know that unfortunately at this stage, we're still in lockdown and no synagogue services are permitted, which means it'll be up to you to make a meaningful Yom Kippur. Open up your machzor. Many of you already have a booklet I published a couple of weeks back, which has pages from the machzor that you can say in your home. Make sure, thank you very much, Judy. Make sure you have a look at it. And there's also another booklet I published just a couple of weeks ago about things to ponder over Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. It's up to you to make this high holiday season a meaningful one. Don't rely on your rabbi or anyone else. You can do it because you can make a sanctity place or a place of holiness in your very own home and find a quiet space where you can do your prayers and your own thoughts. Coming up next week, we have a lot of good stuff coming up and a special. I'll come back to the special in a moment. But coming up next week, we've got someone who's going to be speaking about born in Russia but went via Shepparton and also Brunswick. He'll be speaking a bit about his experience. On the 15th of October, we'll have a special. It'll be a 1-hour special, not our traditional half hour. It'll go from 11 till 12 and it's called Meet the Candidates, and I'll be interviewing 4 candidates from the Camden ward of Glenira in the lead up to the forthcoming elections. We'll have 2 male candidates, 2 female candidates. There are clearly a lot more candidates, but we would never get through our material if I invited more than 4. So I'll have 4 candidates that I'll be interviewing. The following week on the 22nd, we've got David Klein, who was intubated around Pesach time and then put on an ECMO machine because they were worried for his, we'll explain when we get there. They're worried for his survival. He did pull through, and he and possibly his wife will join us for an interview, one-on-one. As long as you're not there, that's fine. That'll be on the 22nd. We've got other guests lined up, including Dr. Waronka, who turned around the Bronx, Orthodox Jew who turned around a Bronx city or general education school. And so we've got a lot lined up. There'll be a program pretty much running through till mid-December. I take this opportunity to thank you for coming along today, participating. Again, go to our either Facebook page or the YouTube channel of ours to see other materials that we've posted in the last 7 days. Wishing you a Gemar Chatima Tova, all the very, very best. If anyone, by the way, wants to sign up for the newsletter and hasn't already because you want to stay in touch, that's fine. Just type in your name and email address now into the chat. You can do it privately to me if you like, or and I'm marked here as St. Kilda Shule, or to everyone, and I'll try to Blinetta add you to the newsletter list effective today. So thank you very much. All the very best to you. Well over the fast. May it be a meaningful day to all of you. Thank you very, very much.